It's very interesting because it also relates to the Mangolds. Colleen will tell you about them as well. And through marriage, the Mangold family was hooked up. The destiny of the Mangold family was interlocked with the destiny of the Reed family. So it touches on the Craggs as well, as you'll find out. And the other thing which fascinated me most is that my wife Sonia is by origin a Barnard on her father's side, and in direct descent as a result, not only from the Barnards of the famous De Leon Mateer, the forest people, but also of the Terblanche family. And one of the ladies that you will hear Dave talking about is Anna Terblanche, whose Sonia's fifth great-grandmother. And I know Dion's around here somewhere. Dion, are you at the back there? Yeah. So Dion Jerling is here, and the Jerling family sold the farm, as Dave will tell you, to the Reeds. And Sonia is here, so we've got direct descendants of the people that Dave is going to talk about. And we have the Reed family members, some of them here. So Dave, I don't know if we're ready to go yet. Are we ready to go, guys? Let's check out outside.
We did this talk a couple of weeks ago in Neisner. Sorry, my battling a little bit with some flu ailments. And Mrs. Park came up to me and she said to me afterwards, "Thank you very much for doing it. It was very interesting, but I could hear you, and then I couldn't hear you, and I could hear you, and I couldn't hear you." And this kind of worried me as to what the hell was I doing. I'm unaware of it. She says, "Well, you can't hold the mic here and then turn your head like that because you won't hear through the mic." I thought, "Oh, thank you very much." So I think they were a little concerned. That's why they've stuck me up with this, which is far better. You know, a lot of people have said, "Why have we done this? Are you a Reed?" No, I'm not a Reed. And it was a very interesting time that we traveled through looking for information. And it was very interested in phoning people and saying to people, "Sir, I believe you've got knowledge on the Reeds. I would really, really like to come and have a chat to you so that I can understand, you know, about the Reeds to learn further." And it was, most of the time I went, "Yes." "Are you a Reed?" "No, sir." "Then why are you doing this?" And sometimes I just left it at the hanging like that, but it was sort of went down that way. And then I went the other way, which was a very interesting one for me. I phoned somebody and he says and he started speaking Afrikaans. En hy sê vir my, "Luister boet, daar's net een persoon in hierdie plek wat jy moet in die hande kry en hy sal vir jou alles sê van die Reeds." Toe sê ek, "Okay, maar wie is hierdie ou?" "Sy naam is Graham Reed," hy sê vir my. "Hy sal alles vir jou kan sê." So thank you, Graham. You've provided an awful lot of the information for me and was a great help. But in all fairness, I think when it started, I got this feeling that Graham and Sandy were saying, "Oh, here's another one of these guys that are going to ask 50 questions and then disappear into the sunset, and we don't see them or hear from them again." I think it got to the end where they were saying, "Geez, why don't you stay away for a little while now, because you're spending so much time with us." But thanks, I really appreciate your input. One of the reasons why this was actually, we decided to do it as a family was that, well, Mom and Dad came here in 1952 for the first time to Arch Rock. We slept in a little cottage tent there on stretchers. 4 of us crammed into this little, and it became the place that my dad came every year for 3 weeks with no remorse. He was here, and he just loved this part of the world. My mom and dad got to know John and Kathy very well and became very good friends with them. And towards the end, we actually were upgraded from the tent and we then moved to the farmhouse. We spent two Christmases there, and they also had another shack across on the other side where we spent time. And I think that was really the reason of it. We continued to come for many years, and as I say, right until the time that my dad passed away at 85, they were then moved after John died, and they started to go to the Cape Provincial Admin. That became, I can't remember, and then it became Forever Resorts. And I think it's just that excitement that's done it. So the basis of the book is undoubtedly quite a lot about John Reed, but it's not sufficient for us to make it, so we will go on to the Reeds in the Crags and spend a bit of time there. We will look at various other places that the Reeds were and we'll expand on that to make it sort of interesting to find out where the Reeds actually went to and where they were living at the end of the time. It all started for us in 1768, shall I say, because Anna Reed and Henry Reed got married in 1868 in Portsmouth. Now Portsmouth is just there. That's where it is. And the two got married, and then Anna bore 11 children. 7 of them were males, and 4 were females. Now we are interested in this across here. We're talking about James, who was the original Reed founder to South Africa, shall I say. And we're not going to talk much about William, but William was his brother. So James came out first as a shipwright, and later followed by his brother James, William. Oliver, we haven't followed too much of his history because we've been battling to find some of his history. James was a bachelor of the Royal Marines at some stage, and for a couple of years he was in their services, and he resigned and left that when he moved to the Cape of Good Hope. James had previously met and courted a lady called Elizabeth Hazy Portsmouth, and they had married in 1807, and they then, just after they married, they had one boy who came with them from Portsmouth. The interesting part was that when they got married and they went through the nuptials and they got taken to go and sign documentation, it was found that Elizabeth couldn't sign. She made a cross. And suddenly it was, oh, is she illiterate or isn't she illiterate? So it was quite a surprise, I understand, for the family. But at any rate, she was unable to write. And at that time of the marriage, John was 44 years old and Elizabeth was 21. Now just remember that. It seems to be quite an important age for James. And they went on to have Henry Robert, that was born in the same year as they got married, a daughter Elizabeth who died 3 months after she was born. And she was born in the Cape, and then another daughter called Isabella Amelia that was born in the Cape. James sailed to the Cape on the HMS Abundance in February of 1808. He arrived here 1 year earlier than his wife, who came on the Carmel in 1809. We understand that after he arrived here, he sailed up to Plet twice during that period. The once was to go and get to hire carpenters, and the second trip was that he went and bought a big stock of wood, which he was going to use in the trade that he was going to apply. He got a permit in 1811 to allow him to practice his trade as a shipwright. But unfortunately, when he was living in Cape Town, as such, his wife became very unhappy. And she decided that she wanted to go back home. Now, we never understood the reasons for that. But in 1819, Elizabeth left the Cape with 2 children aboard the William Penn. And James sold up and left the Cape in 1819. Literally a year afterwards, he decided he would return, and he sold up everything. So she sailed off in the first boat, and she obviously arrived across there, and James followed. And when he got to Portsmouth, he unfortunately found that she had passed away. Now, the story of did she pass on the waters, did she pass when she got to London, or where did she actually, pass away, we have not been able to ascertain that. James seemed to be quite surprised with finding this out with, and he decided that he still wanted to make his home in the Cape of Good Hope, and he jumped aboard the next vessel that brought him all the way out here as such. The daughter, we don't know what happened. We were unable to find. The son, we found that he actually had got married at 19, but thereafter the trail runs very quiet. So we're not sure, how far in life the son and the daughter went. James's brother, William Oliver, also a shipwright, left for the Cape in 1817 with his wife Mary. The books tell us he arrived here and he set up a home here. How long or what happened afterwards, we are not really familiar with that. Okay, James marries Annette Blanche. It was reported that James, after he had come back, he moved into the Plettenberg Bay region in his area, and during that time he met and courted a lady called Anna, and she was a de Blanche from George. Anna Elizabeth de Blanche. They were married on the 9th of August in 1825 in the long room of the Dutch Reformed Church in George. But it's interesting, how old was Anna? 21. So he married again there must be something special about 21. So he married, and he was 44 at the time that they actually got married. Now, this is the marriage certificate that you can see across here. In those days, it was just written into a big book, and that is an extract out of one of the files that says that they got married on the 19th of June, 1825. They had 3 children. They had, the first was Olivia Anna, who was born in 25, James Pietrus, that was born in 1826, and Ignatius Oliver, that was born in 1828. Now, there's a couple of things that are quite of interest. Unfortunately, James passed away before Ignatius was baptized. So he passed away roughly at 50 years of age, and it was unfortunate that happened. But just out of interest, Anna married a Van Rooyen when she got bigger and had 11 children. James Pietrus married a Van Rooyen, and he had 10 children. And Ignatius William Oliver, he married a Van Rooyen also, but he only had 9 children. So life came to an end for the children at a very young age when their father passed on. Fortunately, the de Blanche was a very big family, and they were then incorporated into the de Blanche family. And Mrs. Reed, who was now a widow, got married within 1 year. She then married a Barnard. Okay. Now, what happened was that it says here, married Hendrik Barnard on the 21st of August 1931, 1 year after James had passed away. And they apparently did not get on well with their stepfather. Apparently there was a lot of unhappiness in it, the way he treated them, how he shouted at them. Schooling was arranged for them, and there was actually somebody that came out from Scotland to school them when they got to the right age, and the stepfather sent the man packing back with saying, you ain't going to teach him. And it was very felt that they were almost illiterate at the time that they decided to leave the home. So they didn't leave the home together. It was as the one got to the home going age, he left, and then the other one followed. We're not actually sure where the sister fits into this. She sort of at this period of time sort of left. We don't know exactly where she fits into it after this. And from a letter that was written here, we understand that they went to the Vlug. The two brothers made their way to the Vlug. They then bought a farm. How they were financed, we're not sure. And they then bought a farm, and it was called Reedse Poort. Now, this gets interesting. If you look through all of the history and the deeds and everything, we can spell Reeds 3 ways. And we can spell it 3 ways for the same person. R-E-A-D, R-E-I-D, and R-E-E-D. It's, you just find it all over it in about spelt in that format. So I'm not saying that R-E-I-D is bad or is wrong. It's just, it's the way that's in a lot of this. And in this, it actually is shown as R-E-I-D. And they bought this land here, which was called Reedse Poort in De Vlug. Now, at the time, around about the 1860s, Thomas Baines was trying to build a road from Knysna to De Vlug. That was his mission, Knysna to De Vlug. And the difficulty came in getting into the mountains as you get to De Vlug, because the mountains are very steep by all accounts, and not really good for road building, etc., except for one place, Reedse Poort. And in the letter that we've read of Topless, and another document that we have, the Reeds sold the land back to the government for £800 at the request that Baines made to the government, and the actual road then went through the Reedse Poort. There was talk in the document that they might sell half of it, but in the end they just sold the whole jolly lot, and Baines went ahead and put his road into place, and the two Reed brothers then left, rather rich people. It gets very interesting at this point in time. And the main reason that it gets interesting at this point in time is because if you actually read a lot of the documentations, even Patricia Scorers, it said the Reed brothers bought 1862, they bought Matjiesfontein 304. We've actually, I hate to say this in the sense of it, but we have pulled out a lot of records which prove that it was never sold to them in 1862 by the Jeurlings. Now the Jeurlings had moved out from Prussia, as we understand, and the elder brother of the Jeurlings, which was John Jacobs, who came here first in the late 1700s, he was the gentleman that was destined to erect the timber shed. And he was contracted to build the timber shed, which he did. And they had a roof problem just after he had built. And then he built again, and sometime later the roof also, it gave way. obviously the walls are incredibly strong because they're all still standing there today. Now, in thanks for what he had done of building the shed, in 1818, he was, on the 20th of January, was granted the farm Meisjesfontein. If you look carefully, the early Meisjesfontein was 2 words. Time just brought it together, and even today it's 1 word, Meisjesfontein 304. So he got given that land in 1818. Then what happened was his son, Martinus Jurlings, went along and he acquired Meisjesfontein 304. In a deed, which was deed number 253, dated the 12th of August, I noted that it was transferred to Martinus and others as described below. So it was granted to the father, the brother, the son took it over, he got it in his name, and part of the names were Martinus, Petrus, Hendrik Reed, and a James Reed, R-E-I-D, situated in that section of being 3/4 of the land. Now, this might sound very odd to you, because if you look on the other side, there was the Ungra and the Ungra who got the remaining share of a quarter. This we have found it's been pretty common in dealing with lands where lands don't get sold in a whole piece of land. It then gets broken up, as you will see later as we carry on, where a segment of land, and you got this, which was 50, and I got this, which was 50. It seems to have been the way that they divided the land up at that period of time. Right, the purchase of the land, Meisjesfontein 304, the deed of 65, dated the 12th of November, 1866, Martinus Tierneson sold 3/16 of Meisjesfontein to James Ignatius, 13/16. So they never had controlling interests. They had a large portion, but they only had 13/16. Why that happened, we haven't actually found that out. And on deed 253 stands a handwritten record, which sadly illegible, but we can find out from the date that the names Tierneson, Reed, and Jurlings were on it. Now, what happened was the 1818 deed stands to speak like this. So we've got copies of it, and it's handwritten, right? Then when they wanted to, if anything that happened, like this piece of land was sold, and it's deed 65, they wrote down, so they put it on the side, and they then wrote across it, like this. So you had the main deed with the lines going writing this way, and if anything happened to that land, it went down that way. And it became extremely difficult to read. This here, where we are really even battling on that one, has been cleaned up multiple times. We actually got in touch with the deeds office to see if they got anybody with magic potion that could bring this to light, and certainly we were unable to do it. So we in a period from about 1860 to 1900s, where we know these deeds, we've seen the deeds, we can't read the deeds because of the poor way that they've been handled, unfortunately. Now, just to understand, this piece of land that runs across here, there in this map, that is Meisjesfontein 304, okay? To put it in the way that it is today, across there, across here is the old age home, across there, down here is Keurbooms River, where all of these bigger housing estates are on the river, and right across on this side is almost at the waves. That's just to give you some kind of idea where we're looking at. There's another piece of land here that the Reeds did buy, which was also owned by the Jurlings, which we'll talk about later in the discussion. But if you actually have a look at this, this was done in 1910 or something, and it actually says there that this land is owned by the Reeds. RE80. Right. Now, this is the very interesting part that we have found. Handwritten on the original deed of 1880, which granted John Jacob Jerlings the right of the farm on the land, is a handwritten reference to deed 253 dated the 12th of November. The amendment reads as follows. This is the deed. As I said, the writing starts this way, they then turn it around and they go uphill, as you can see across here. And it says, amended title deed dated the 22nd of March 1907, issued under the provision of that Act in favor of Ignatius William Oliver Reed and James Petrus Cornelius Reed, conveying the land included in the original grant to them. So what we saw on that grant in 1818, this written on that same grant, there it is there, and that is nice and legible, I can show you, we can see it. This one is the section here where his son in 86, I think it was, or 60, him and others got a piece of the land. That was in that deed there, and this was the last deed. So the records show to us that in 1907, and we've got further points that we'll discuss, is actually the date when the two brothers took ownership of Maatjiesfontein 304. Sorry to break people's beliefs, but we're pretty comfortable with the documents we have. Okay, next one. Right, this is what the land looked like. It was broken up. There was a number of transactions that happened during 1907, but finally it landed up in this transaction where portion 1 of the land there went to James. They don't call it portion 2 for some reason, they call it the remainder. And apparently that happens all over, that if they divide a land, this is portion 1 and that's the remainder. And the remainder went to his brother Ignatius. As you can see, it's divided up there. This is what we found out, that was the deed of 1784, and it had a whole lot of stuff in it to pass of voluntary partitions, declaration of the partition of land, but all written by obviously clever people. But at the end of the day, it came back to that land now belonged to the Reeds. Here is just so that you can get an idea, very simply, those two pieces of land mirrored each other. They were both 416 morgen. So there was, both were divided down the middle and they got equal shares. Equal shares. And unfortunately what happened was, if this took place in 1907, Ignatius passed away in 1908, and James passed away shortly thereafter in 1916. So all the hard work that the two brothers had doing in getting the land or securing the land for the Rees family, which they owned for over 100 years after that, poor old Ignatius didn't get the chance to really, and we'll see when we talk about the Craigs, we'll talk about him again up there. Right, Ignatius and Martha Reed, where did they fit into the picture? James Petrus Reed, right, the one that was married to Van Rooyen, the one that had 10 children. One of the children was this guy here called Ignatius Reed, and he seemed to have been picked by his father to look after a lot of the lands and a lot of the farms and all the rest of it. And James, the son of Elizabeth, and that Martha was born and raised in the Murray's district and schooled in Knysna. Ignatius and Martha married on the 9th of October 1880 in Aberdeen Community Hall. And she bore 3 children, only 3. It was easy around that one, and it was Oliver John, Anna Susanna, and John Gray. That was all that came around. And you can see in the times that was all around the 1881, 83, 87. Ignatius and Martha's daughter, Anna Reed, married Frank Mangold on the 29th of August 1905 and lived at the Storms River Village. Now, very, very briefly, the story goes that his father, they bought a sawmill in Storms River, and he was then put in to run it, being Frank, at the age of 19. Somewhere along the line, he had met this lady called Anna Reed, who was for some time living in Neisner. It goes that he would look at the stars in the sky, and if it was clear on a Friday night, he would take off on his horse, and he would ride all the way to Neisner from Storms River, arrive early morning, where they would leave biscuits and cold tea for him, and then the family would finally wake up and do whatever they did, and then come the Sunday night, he headed back home again, arrived home to open the wood saw on the Monday morning. And apparently this went on for a good couple of years. It wasn't just one or two of it. If you look at the records, there's over a few years that they did this. And finally they got wise and they got married in Neisner as such. Ignatius and Martha celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary at the Reed's Hotel in 1930. Remember, they got in 1880, they were married in 1930. They had a very big celebrations for it. And interestingly enough, there's a very big writing in one of the papers on exactly what happened and who was there and who wasn't there. 1938, a portion of reeds of the Matjiesfontein was transferred to Ignatius, measuring 166 Morgan, up to portion 32. Right. The reason that we've put that in is because you'll find a lot of references to the reed farm, the reed farm, the reed farm. And the reed farm is made up of 2 sections. Portion 2, which was under the National Road where it stands now, and portion 32, which is under bush at the moment. That's all I can say to you. It's really, it was a big area, very close to where the old hotel, the Frederick Hotel and the old age home is now. It's in that area. And it was always referred to as the Reeds. And they were given it. Martha's assistant, you might want to know why we put that in. Very interesting is that she had this assistant who had lived from a very young age with her and went right through as her chaperone or her whatever. And she passed away in 1956. And in the will, she was left money, a sizable amount of money for her loyalty to the family. And if you actually go to the graveyards, she's buried right next door to Mrs. Reed. And she was also said if she outlives the Reeds, the Reed Mr. and Mrs., and she runs out of money, one of the 3 others would then make money available for her. So she was obviously well liked and looked after. Right, if we have a look here, and just so that you understand, that's the original breakdown, portion 1, the remainder. This is where Reeds is situated. That's where it is situated. There is portion 2 and portion 32. And that is where John Reed actually farmed until he passed away in that region. Okay. Ignatius and Martha had been very successful farmers, including ostriches, but at the onset of World War I, the collapse of the ostrich industry, The Plettenberg Bailey whaling station was closing down in 1916 at that point in time, and Ignatius and Martha decided to open the Reeds Hotel in 1916, which we understand was a very successful. If you read about the farm, you'll find that people kept on going back, and kept on back. Apparently, Martha, always everybody knew her. Lala, her nickname was actually Lala. She was always there to welcome the people and say goodbye to them when they left, and she would hurry around the tables checking everybody's okay. And on a good Sunday they had up to 12 different vegetables that they put onto the table. After Ignatius passed away in 1937, their son John had returned from farming in Crawford to help his mother run the farm. They decided to sell it in 1914. Now, they did not sell it to the Kochs. Captain Edward Buckley purchased the hotel in 1945 and continued to trade it as the Reeds Hotel. And he traded it for another 10 years, and then it was sold to the Kochs. And that is when the Kochs then named it after their eldest son, Frederick. So, it's interesting. It was, the name remained for 10 years, still run under Captain Buckley, and then it moved along to the Kochs, and it moved on to various people after that. That is John Reed with his mother, who was 89 at the time of this pictures, and they had been on a trip apparently somewhere into the forests together. That was Lala or Martha, and that was John in his good days. Okay, Martha, let me go a little bit closer there. Martha and John were married in 1887. Start again. John was born in 1887, and there's a belief that and there's a number of books that he said he was born at the hotel because his dad was manager being Ignatius, not Ignatius Senior, but Ignatius Junior, and he had run the hotel for 3 years. And there's a fair bit of documents that say that he was more than likely born at the Welcome Hotel, which, as we know, went to become the Formosa later on. Now, John was sent up to Crawford to school. He schooled in Crawford, and he did very, very well for himself. He then matriculated, and at the time of the Standard 10, shall I say, he was the captain of the football team. And he had somebody that was with him at the football team that we will talk about later. He then returned to Maatjiesfontein from 07 to 15, and he stayed there, and he farmed on Maatjiesfontein during that period. But in 1915, his brother-in-law, remember, his sister married Frank Mangold. His brother-in-law, Frank Mangold, approached him and said, "I've bought a farm in the Batuli district up in the Orange River, and we'd like you to go and farm that for us." He took off in 1916, and he must have gone by the train all the way up to the station up there, and he started to farm. And the stories in the books tell us that within a 2-year period, he had already put lucerne into the fields, he had done a tremendous amount of cleaning up, and he was being very successful as a farmer. But it wasn't his farm, it was the Mangolds' farm. The farm, called River Prospect, was a portion of Bos-Duivelsklop. Now, Bos-Duivelsklop was a very, very big farm up in that area, and the Mangolds bought a portion of Bos-Duivelsklop. It used to belong to the Navals, and believe me if you want to, or don't believe me if you don't want to, the family of the Navals was 27 with all their kids. There's a picture of it, 27. And Anyway, maybe that's why they had to sell a portion of the farm to John then met another lady called Grace Alexander. Now, Grace Alexander was on a farm down the road. They weren't next door, as some people make us believe, that they were down the road on the other side of the national road, as we know today then too. And John was on this side, and they were on that side. And it was called Summing Hill, and was the Alexandras farm. And the Alexandras had 4 daughters. And John had then approached the one, Grace Alexander, and they decided to get married in 1918 at Summers Hills, and everything took place on their farm. But they returned to river prospecting after that, where John was farming at the time. She was a British subject. She wasn't a South African subject at the time of marriage. She was a British subject. Okay. Grace bore John 2 children. Now, it's interesting. It's getting less and less at the moment, but there's 2 children, and the one was called Margaret, and the other one was called Gray. And Gray was the son that unfortunately went to World War II and was killed in 1944 in Italy. Margaret went on to get married, and she then went to live in the Natal area. In the meantime, the Mangos decided to sell the farm, and they decided to sell river prospecting. And river prospecting was then purchased by a guy by the name of De Blanche, and he carried on farming on the same methods apparently as what John had done, very successfully, and that left John with nowhere to go. And what subsequently happened was in 1967, they started to build the new dam wall, the wood dam wall. And in 1970, they then started to flood the area, and river prospecting on all those farms, Bos, Davilskop, and all those farms along that whole water line, all are underwater today. So river prospecting as such doesn't stand. You can we got it on a map, but that's what we've finally found. He went across to Graafrenet. John went across to Graafrenet, and he met up with a guy called Sidney Rutledge. Now, remember I said John had a vice captain in the soccer team, and Sidney Rutledge was the vice captain. And they were very famous marina farmers. They still farm marinas, and they started farming them in the 1800s. Unfortunately, the 2 of them didn't see eye to eye. For whatever reason, there's actually a letter that's been written about it, and John decided then that he would return home to help his mother with the Reeds Hotel, and that is why he came back. In the letter that was put into the paper of their 50th anniversary, they said John was living in the Graafrenet at that time. So he only came back after or just before his dad actually died, and he died in 1937. In 1947, Grace passed away, and that, I think, was very hard for the family. But John being John, he married Kathleen a few years later in 1954. Kathleen Nellie Lamont. She was a Haywood. She had a son from a previous marriage, and the husband had passed away as well. And they got married in 1954 in Mossel Bay. Unfortunately, this is one of these things. There's a lot of people that say they weren't married. Some people say they were. John's grandson in the UK says they weren't married. Unfortunately, Sonia managed to find the marriage certificate, so John and Nellie were married together. I'm actually surprised at this stage that nobody has said, who the hell is Nellie? Kathleen. He never married a Kathleen. I've been waiting for this question to come. Kathleen Nellie is Aunt Sally. Okay? It's Aunt Sally. So her correct name is Kathleen Nellie Lamont, and she was and then Ania Haywood. So we're talking about Sally. Okay, John's mother, Martha, sold him the farm. There we talk about the reeds. Remember, it was portion 2 and portion 32. They made it all together, which John farmed until he passed away in 1964. John was buried at the Welcome Cemetery in Plettenberg Bay, and next to his beloved Grace, his mother, his father, his brother Oliver, and Miss Van Rooyen. Kathleen left the farm after John passed away, and she moved on, or Sally moved on, and passed away in 1970 at a place called Evander. For the people that don't know Evander, it's in the coal fields just outside of Joburg, going towards Nelspruit. You find it on the left-hand side there. And her son was living there, and she moved in across there. Now, that is John's house that he built. And this here is quite interesting. That is the son. That is on sale. And this was John's house that he built, an unusual 6-sided house that he built and that they lived in. And that house unfortunately burnt down between 64 and 70. There was a keeper put into it to look after the caravan park and the rest that they hadn't sold. And apparently a lantern went over and the whole bloody lot went down. But it was one of these that was all of redwoods and stinkwoods and yellowwoods, so it was a hell of a loss. Now, that still stands today. If you turn off at the old age home, you go around the old age home, like this, you'll see it standing up top there. It's got developed a name called the Spoorcase for some reason. But it's standing there. All the walls are still there, but it's got mammoth trees that have grown through everything across there. That was built on the basis that he apparently was walking through the veld the one day, and he needed to build that because that was built between 42 and 47. We actually haven't got the date. And he went along and he saw a spider web glistening in the early morning dew. And he said, that's what I'm going to do. And that's where that unique design of the house actually came from. Right, we spoke about Lot 67 and Matjiesfontein, and we showed it on the map. That was an area that was right next door to Matjiesfontein 304. And this piece of land here, and here is Matjiesfontein, and just to give you it in the right contents, Matjiesfontein goes up there. Here is the township, the Keurbooms township. Now, this is Arch Rock. And all good, that's the remainder. So this is, it's not very clear, this is Rusklip, and that's called Arch Rock. 1857, Lot 612 was granted Matjies River, measuring 465 morgen, was sold to Jacobus Christoffel Jerling for 180 pounds. Included as part of the land was Rusklip, Arch Rock, and the remainder of 67, which is that piece of land. 1861 was sold to Martinus Wilhelmus Tiersen for a big profit, 875 pounds. And it was then sold in 1904 to a conglomerate of Reed. There was, I think, there was 5 Reeds that then bought that land period. However, we are also in a grey area between that time and this time, very much the same that we have with Matjiesfontein. We know these deeds, we can't understand the deeds, and there appears to have been some movement before 1904 where somebody could have bought or possibly did buy, we don't know. But we've left it at 1904. Right, and you can see the land was then divided up as follows. In 1827, it was divided up into mutual agreements. Henry Reed, he got Rusclip, which was this section across here, of 144 Morgan. Ignatius, he got this section here, which was Arch Rock. And John and Colin and Raymond got the remainder across here to farm, and it was broken up in that way. Unfortunately, what happened was that because of the township that they were developing in 1927, Hendrik gave up 28 Morgan, and that is now the 28 Morgan where the township is situated, the Keurbooms-Strand township as such. So he lost out. He went then from 144 Morgan down to 118 Morgan, and that was when the land began. And there's actually a document that said that they were given the go-ahead in 1927-28 to begin the building of the township. How are we doing for time? Oh, can I sit down now? Okay, we've got a few more slides, so just bear with me. I'll go as quickly as I can. The Crags is also a very interesting place when you start to study it. In 1846, Sinclair and Harker, a wood merchant company, purchased Woodlands 42, lot 43, 44, and 52, which then became to be known as Laredo. They purchased those portions of land, and they then were obviously farming and removing trees. And along came Ignatius in 1873, and he purchased all that land from Sinclair and Harker. And that land then became part of the Reeds. At the time, Jimmy Reed, his name was James, and it's not the senior, it's the junior. Jimmy farmed at Woodlands across here, and his brother Lorenzo, also called Laurie, he started on this piece of land here, which was called Keurbooms in the beginning. And then when he moved in, he changed the name to Laredo, but it was originally known as Keurbooms. We got a little piece of land there, lot 4. That is a piece of land that they bought from the Jerlings. The Jerlings have this farm here, Buffels Rivier, and for some reason the Reeds went out and bought that little piece of land there. Okay, Jimmy and Laurie, interestingly enough, in 1906, they went and took a mortgage out. Now, understanding that their father had died in 1908, and what had happened was that when they died, the one got Woodlands, the other got Laredo, and Jimmy got the remainder of Arch Rock 304. He got the whole section of the remainder. So they went out and they then raised a mortgage, and the farm, Jimmy got all the ones in black and Woodlands, and Lorenzo or Laurie got all the ones in red. You can see there, the subdivision comes on the Salt River that goes through there. And it was divided into the 2 sections, and they carried on farming those lands. Jimmy, at his time at Woodlands, actually built a school. He first built a place that became a hotel, and he's still standing there today as part of Curland. And he built a school of 90 pupils, and he got a deed of transfer was granted for the Woodlands undenominational public school in 1912, and in 1913 a school was raised and built, which still, as I understand, still stands there today. Now, what was interesting in the deed, that deed, it said the late James Petrus Cornelius Reed did during his lifetime donate to the under-mentioned transferees as a gift for education purposes the under-mentioned property. And that then he was his gift to the school. Right? Yes. There's still a school going there, I believe very strong. Yeah. The original school, as I understand, was a clay and mortar, grass roof. And then I understand the one that was built after 1913 was something far more substantial than that, yeah. This is very briefly, just to talk about this, just to let the people know that the Reeds also went to Nature's Valley. They, James Petrus Cornelius, he bought that piece of land there, which was only 18 hectares at the time. But when the road that came down here was finally built, the forestry department went down and claimed 3 pieces of land, 1 for themselves and 2 for sale. And you had Barney Bonato that was sitting across here with all his land that he had sort of got hold of and was looking after the area. That piece of land there that was owned by James appears that nothing was done to that piece of land. He had to withhold that land for a period of 51 years, for 5 years, and after 5 years he could pass it on and sell it, and it would appear that he then sold that piece of land to Bonato at that time. All right, thank you very much. Any questions, please? No, it was Bernardo. Bernardo. Hello, my dear.
As to you've shown us all these lovely maps. I have no idea where these are. You're talking as though we know where it is. If you can just give us some landmarks as to what was shown.
Okay, sure, no problem, no problem. Can you go back and just find the maps? No, carry on. What? Carry on? Nope, right at the front, the dirty brown one. That one. Okay. Here is the Keurbooms River. The Keurbooms River flows down here, across here. This is the sea. There's the sea coming around there. The river flows down here and it comes down into the sea here. There's Stanley Island as such. Now the bridge as we know today is across here. All right. And this is the map just when it was bought. Okay. So there was apparently one spring in one place across here. This stretches right up here and down there. Have you ever been on the road to Keurbooms-Strand? Oh, the one that not the one that runs along past the waves and everywhere like that. If you know where if you go to Enrique's, you've gone down it. Now, the section down that road, you suddenly find towards the end, before you get to what they call the Drury, there's a whole lot of big fancy houses, 5, 6 of them. That is roughly the territory where that is. So the initial one, and this here, in the early days, was on top of the mountain, across here. The first road actually ran up here and then went around, and then the new road, as we know today, going up the hill, past time and again, runs up here. And the Reeds lost a portion of that land. At the time, portion 2 was taken by the roads department for the new road that went. So are you kind of following this piece? I'll be with you now, 2 seconds. This piece across here is arch rock. That's arch rock across here. Here you've got a road that you can actually go up the back and it brings you all the way out to Moss and Maple. And this is, as I say, this is where the township was sort of set up there on that. Here, across here is the river, the Maiches River. And just across here is the cave that they found, where they found all the old bones and skulls and all of that there. Yes. I'm going to just ask this man, he's been waving his head. Sorry.
He shows what Chris Becker has now bought.
Here, bliksem, ek is bly jy sit so stil daar agter, meneer. Jy ken it. Goed. I'm asking my friend Graham because he overlooks it. Can you advise for us? Okay.
Hello, I'm Graham. We sold a portion in 2019, which we had our old chalets on. We sold that portion to Koos in 2019, yeah. So he's our neighbor now and my cousin Jeff's neighbor on the eastern side, yeah.
Right next
So
door to?
He's in the old caravan park, if you want to know. Yeah, the building's now called the Blow, yes, that's it, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You understand? You're familiar now? Good. So, okay. 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 Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, you were looking for, eh? A farmhouse, okay. Let me just think where the easier. Just go forward again. Yeah. Okay. Look, yeah. I think the easiest way to explain it to you, just after time and again, you know. Is that what it is? I thought it was an old age. Okay. If you turn in to go just after time and again, you turn in to go to Keurbooms-Strand, right? Are you with me? Okay. Yeah, I unfortunately haven't got a picture of it here. Yeah. Okay. Yes, Senrail owns it. Yes, yeah. Well, it's a very interesting one because I'm worried it's going to be pulled down one of the days, to be honest with you. Hello, can you hear me now? Oh, okay. There was a question that was put forward about the old house that belonged to John Reed that is standing just around the corner from Plet Manor. Okay? Yeah. So the question was asked, what is doing about it? The house itself, as it stands, is on property, private property.
No, not that.
No. Which house are you talking? John's old house?
I'm not talking about that one.
Oh, not that one.
No.
Okay, you're talking about the one that's still standing today that's just in the trees. Yes. Was it on Sally's old house? Did she? Okay. Yeah. Okay, this.
Where was this hotel that you are referring to? It's the old Friedrich that now is the manor. But where is it?
Was knocked down.
Before that it was the Friedrich and before that it was the Rita.
Yeah. It stood right in the middle of, and at one stage they were talking about keeping a portion of it as like a place for meat clubhouse, yeah. And then it was just taken down totally because they actually started to build this way, and it was still standing there as such, yeah.
Can I answer the Colin's question?
Yes, sure, go for it.
I think that Colin's touching on something which is at the heart of the History Society, which is the proper identification and conservation of old buildings, particularly ones from over 60 years ago. And the house that I think Colin's referring to is the one that's immediately adjacent to the N2 opposite Time and Again. If you turn off to Keurbooms-Strand, it's the very first tiny little road on your left. And yeah, and the building's in good nick. I mean, it's worthy of preservation, I think. But the difficulty, Colin, is that it has already been expropriated as part and parcel of the land on which it stands. And it's designated for presumably the widening of the current N2 when that whole road upgrading takes place in the distant future. So in a sense, if there were ever to be opposition, it should have taken place during the original expropriation. Now, the only people we've left to deal with is SANRAL itself, which is the road authority. It's state land by decree, and we would have to engage with the state through, similar to what's that campaign, the Small Boat Harbour campaign. As citizens of Plet, we'd have to engage with that authority, take them on legally, and prevent the exploitation of that particular site. For me, as a veteran activist, it's a big ask, I think, because the rights of the state are pretty well entrenched there. But you know, where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, it was 1970s, early 80s that the state took that building over, expropriated it. Yeah. There's still people living in it at the moment. Yeah, there's still people. It's an 8-bedroom place upstairs.
I think you should have your own talk.
I think so. Could I say
Sure.
that at least we should document. We should at least document, you know, the history of that old house. It's very, very old.
It is.
Yeah.
It according to the grandson, that was his house that belonged to Lala and Ignatius's house.
Mm-hmm.
And they lived in there. And recently I was in Riversdale talking to a Reed who gave me pictures of Antonio Lorenzo. Remember, he was up at Laredo. And when his mother was dying, he came down and he lived with her in that house until 1920. And then in 1920 he left and he went up to Tanganyika to farm up there, which wasn't successful. We've tried to trace it back, but we got that window. And I've been to SANRAL and I spent time with SANRAL and they sent me whatever they could. We can follow it all the way back to a family called the Barnards that actually lived in it at one stage. And there's a gap between 1920 as to who was actually responsible for it.
And so I always thought it had belonged to the Jerlings before.
I haven't.
That
Sure.
it went way back to the 1700s.
Well, the land belonged to them. What we have found, interestingly enough, in finding that Maatjiesfontein 304 was sold in 1907, it answers a lot of questions as to what was on that land, and there's talk. The one discussion says that the Jerlings had a hotel there, and the hotel that the Reeds took over to then make the Reeds Hotel was actually the Jerlings' as hotel. So, and there's a fair bit of that you can put together, that there was houses there, and who knows, it might well have been part of the Jerlings, I don't know.
Well, thank you for your very, very amazing work that you've done on it. Thank you.
Anybody else got anything they would like to ask?
I think you'll have to ask while we have our refreshments.
No, sure.
You've gone right into the refreshment time and the staff want to go home. In keeping with our giving something
Thank you
from
very much.
Porcupine Ceramics, that's something for you, Dave. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So we're going to go into refreshments in the back there now. If you can open